The terminal buzzed with the usual sounds of an airport: rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and hurried conversations. But amidst the flow of travelers, a tense scene unfolded at the security checkpoint. "Miss, you need to step aside," a stern-looking TSA officer barked. 17-year-old Maya Carter froze. She had done nothing wrong, yet all eyes were suddenly on her. She had just placed her bag on the conveyor belt, ready for scanning, when the officer's face twisted with suspicion. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her stomach. "Your ID looks fake," another officer chimed in, crossing his arms. "And where are your parents?" Maya's heart pounded. She was traveling alone for the first time, heading to meet her father after finishing a summer program at an Ivy League university. Her mother had dropped her off, and she had passed through check-in with no issues, so why now? "My ID is real. I just came through security at my last stop with no problem," Maya said, keeping her composure. But the officers weren't listening. Instead, one of them whispered to a colleague, and before Maya could react, she saw the unmistakable blue and red flashes reflecting off the airport windows. "Great," she muttered under her breath. "They called the police." She reached for her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed her father's number. "Dad, I need you." Maya clutched her phone, her fingers tightening around it, as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the terminal. Two uniformed police officers strode toward her, their expressions unreadable. "What's going on here?" One officer, a burly man with a shaved head, asked the TSA agents. "She presented a suspicious ID, and she doesn't have a guardian with her," one of the security officers said. His tone was clipped, but there was something else there. Disdain. Maya took a deep breath. "Stay calm." "That's not true," she interjected. "I just came from another airport. My ID is valid, and I have my boarding pass. I didn't do anything wrong." The police officer held out his hand. "Let's see it." Maya hesitated for half a second before pulling her ID out of her wallet. The officer examined it, flipping it back and forth in his hands. "Where did you get this?" "It's mine," Maya said, trying not to let frustration creep into her voice. "And where are your parents?" "I told you, I'm traveling to meet my father." "Uh-huh," the officer said, unimpressed. He exchanged glances with the TSA agents, and a silent decision seemed to pass between them. "Miss, we're going to need you to come with us." Maya's heart dropped. They weren't listening. They had already made up their minds about her. "This is a mistake," she protested, her voice growing firm. "I have nothing to hide. My dad is on his way right now." The officer sighed. "Then he can clear this up when he gets here." Maya's jaw clenched as she felt the weight of stares from other travelers. Some looked confused. Others avoided eye contact altogether. She wanted to scream, to demand they stop treating her like a criminal, but she knew better. Instead, she squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and said, "You're going to regret this." The officer chuckled. "Oh yeah? And why's that?" Maya met his gaze, unflinching. "Because my father owns this airport." Maya clutched her phone, her fingers tightening around it, as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the terminal. Two uniformed police officers strode toward her, their expressions unreadable. "What's going on here?" One officer, a burly man with a shaved head, asked the TSA agents. "She presented a suspicious ID, and she doesn't have a guardian with her," one of the security officers said. His tone was clipped, but there was something else there. Disdain. Maya took a deep breath. "Stay calm." "That's not true," she interjected. "I just came from another airport. My ID is valid, and I have my boarding pass. I didn't do anything wrong." The police officer held out his hand. "Let's see it." Maya hesitated for half a second before pulling her ID out of her wallet. The officer examined it, flipping it back and forth in his hands. "Where did you get this?" "It's mine," Maya said, trying not to let frustration creep into her voice. "And where are your parents?" "I told you. I'm traveling to meet my father." "Uh-huh," the officer said, unimpressed. He exchanged glances with the TSA agents, and a silent decision seemed to pass between them. "Miss, we're going to need you to come with us." Maya's heart dropped. They weren't listening. They had already made up their minds about her. "This is a mistake," she protested, her voice growing firm. "I have nothing to hide. My dad is on his way right now." The officer sighed. "Then he can clear this up when he gets here." Maya's jaw clenched as she felt the weight of stares from other travelers. Some looked confused. Others avoided eye contact altogether. She wanted to scream, to demand they stop treating her like a criminal, but she knew better. Instead, she squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and said, "You're going to regret this," the officer chuckled. "Oh yeah? And why's that?" Maya met his gaze, unflinching. "Because my father owns this airport." At the airport, Maya stood stiffly between the two officers as they led her toward a small security room near the terminal gates. Passengers turned to stare, whispering among themselves. Some looked concerned, others indifferent. A few even smirked, assuming she had done something wrong. Her pulse pounded in her ears. They really think I'm a criminal. One of the officers, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a badge reading Henderson, opened the door to the holding area. "Sit tight," he said, as he gestured for her to step inside. "We're waiting for someone to process you." "This is a mistake," Maya said through gritted teeth. The other officer, the wiry one who had mocked her earlier, smirked. "Yeah. Then why do you look so nervous?" Maya clenched her fists but said nothing. There was no point arguing, because in a few minutes, her father would be here. And these men? They had no idea what was coming. Outside the airport, a sleek black limousine screeched to a halt in front of the terminal entrance. The moment the doors unlocked, Donovan Pierce stepped out, his presence commanding attention even in the crowded drop-off zone. A security guard near the entrance approached, but one sharp glare from Donovan sent the man backing away. "Sir, you can't park here." "I don't have time for this," Donovan cut in coldly, already striding toward the doors. His assistant, a sharp-dressed woman named Elena, rushed behind him, her phone in hand. "Sir, I just got an update. The TSA agents have detained Maya near Gate 14, she said quickly. Donovan's jaw clenched. "How many people are involved?" "2 officers and a TSA supervisor." "Good." Donovan's expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. These men had dared to touch his daughter, and now they would pay the price. As Donovan stepped into the airport, heads turned. Passengers, staff, even security guards recognized him. Some whispered his name. Others simply froze at the sheer power he radiated. But Donovan wasn't here for them. He was here for his daughter. And he was about to teach a lesson no one at this airport would ever forget. Inside the security room, Maya sat rigidly on the cold metal chair. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the sterile white walls. Officer Henderson leaned against the table, arms crossed, while the wiry officer, his badge read Keller, tapped his foot impatiently. "You know," Keller said, smirking, "I don't get why kids like you think you can just do whatever you want." Maya shot him a glare, but stayed silent. She knew better than to react. Henderson checked his watch. "Shouldn't take long. If your story checks out, you'll be free to go." Maya almost laughed at the irony. They had no idea what was coming. A sudden knock at the door made both officers turn. Before anyone could answer, the door swung open with force. And there, standing in the doorway, was Donovan Pierce. His sharp navy suit was crisp. His posture radiated authority. and his piercing eyes locked onto the officers like a lion surveying its prey. Silence filled the room. "Maya," he said smoothly, "are you all right?" Maya stood, relief washing over her. "Dad." "Sir, this is a private area," Henderson cut in, frowning. "You can't just—" Donovan's gaze slowly turned to him. The weight of his stare alone made the officer hesitate. Then, in a tone so calm it was terrifying, Donovan asked, "Do you have any idea who I am?" Keller scoffed. "I don't care who you are. This girl was causing a disturbance, so we detained her," Donovan finished for him. His voice was calm but razor sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. Keller's smirk faltered. Donovan took a step forward, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a sleek black ID card and placed it on the table. Henderson picked it up, his eyes scanning the text, until they stopped abruptly at the top line. His face drained of color. Donovan Pierce, chairman and majority owner, Pierce Aviation and Transport. Keller leaned over his shoulder to read it. His mouth fell open. You own the airport," Henderson whispered. "That's right," Donovan said coolly. "And you just detained my daughter." Henderson swallowed hard, gripping the ID card like it was suddenly burning his fingers. Keller, still frozen, tried to mask his panic, but the beads of sweat forming on his temple betrayed him. "Sir, we didn't know she was your daughter," Henderson stammered. Donovan stepped closer, his presence commanding the entire room. He took back his ID with a slow, deliberate movement. "Oh, so if she weren't my daughter, this treatment would be acceptable?" No, sir, of course not." "Then explain to me," Donovan cut him off, his voice like steel, "why my daughter was treated like a criminal in my own airport." Keller straightened up, still trying to act tough. "We were just following protocol." "Your protocol is to harass teenage girls who've done nothing wrong," Donovan snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. Keller flinched. Maya, standing beside her father now, folded her arms. "I told them I was waiting for someone, but they didn't listen. They assumed I was lying. One of the staff even called me suspicious looking." Donovan's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward the security cameras mounted in the corner of the room. "I assume these cameras recorded everything?" Henderson hesitated before nodding. "Yes, sir." "Good," Donovan said smoothly, "because I'm going to review the footage myself." Keller let out a nervous chuckle. "Sir, there's no need for that. We can just let her go and forget." "Forget?" Donovan echoed, raising a brow. He chuckled darkly. "Officer, I don't forget. And I certainly don't tolerate incompetence." Keller and Henderson looked at each other, panic flashing between them. "Sir, please," Henderson tried again. "We were just doing our jobs. We didn't mean any harm." Donovan exhaled slowly, then took out his phone and dialed a number. The room was so silent, they could hear the soft ringing on the other end. "Yes," he said when the person picked up. "This is Donovan Pierce. I need the head of airport security in my office within the next 15 minutes. Oh, and send me the footage from holding room B." He ended the call and looked at the two officers. "Now, let's see how you handle answering to someone with actual authority." The tension in the room was suffocating. Henderson and Keller stood stiffly, their faces pale, as Donovan Pierce's words sank in. Within minutes, the head of airport security, a stocky man with graying hair named Michael Rowan, walked into the room. His sharp eyes scanned the scene, immediately sensing the severity of the situation. "Mr. Pierce," Rowan greeted with a respectful nod. "I was told this was urgent." Donovan turned toward him. "Yes, Michael. I need you to review the security footage of my daughter's detainment. I want to know exactly how your staff handled the situation." Rowan didn't hesitate. He motioned for an officer outside to bring in a tablet, which was quickly connected to the airport surveillance system. Within moments, the video began playing. The room fell silent as everyone watched the events unfold. The moment Maya was approached, despite doing nothing wrong, the way Keller smirked as he accused her of loitering, the unjustified aggression in the way Henderson spoke to her, the shameful moment when the staff mocked her protests and dragged her into the holding room. Donovan's expression remained unreadable, but his grip on the table tightened. Maya, standing beside him, saw his knuckles go white. When the footage ended, Rowan's face was red with anger. "This is unacceptable," Rowan growled. "You two, out." "Now," Henderson and Keller hesitated. "Out!" Rowan barked. The two men scrambled toward the door, but Donovan's voice stopped them cold. "Not so fast." They turned, faces ashen. "You think you can humiliate people without consequences?" Donovan said, his voice dangerously low. "You're both suspended, indefinitely." "Sir, please," Henderson started, but Rowan shot him a glare that made him snap his mouth shut. "Consider this mercy," Donovan said, "because if it were up to me, you'd never work in security again." The two men lowered their heads in shame and exited the room without another word. Rowan turned back to Donovan. "Mr. Pierce, I can't apologize enough for this. It won't happen again." Donovan sighed, finally relaxing a little. "Make sure it doesn't." Maya, who had been silent throughout the ordeal, finally spoke. "Thanks, Dad." Donovan smiled slightly and placed a hand on her shoulder. "No one messes with my daughter." The next morning, the story had gone viral. News outlets were covering the shocking treatment of a teenage girl whose only crime was traveling first class while black. Social media exploded with outrage, and hashtags like #Justice for Maya and #Change Airport Policies began trending. The CEO of the airline issued a public apology, stating that they were launching a full investigation. The airport's board also released a statement, condemning racial profiling and announcing mandatory sensitivity training for all employees. Henderson and Keller? They were both fired on the spot. With their names now plastered all over the internet, they struggled to find new jobs. No one wanted to hire employees who had been publicly exposed for discrimination. But Maya didn't just let the experience fade. With the support of her father, she started an initiative to reform airport policies nationwide, ensuring that no one else would have to go through what she did. She became a powerful voice for change, proving that even the worst experiences can lead to something greater. And as for her father, Robert, he simply smiled, proud of the strong, fearless young woman his daughter had become.